Thank you once again for everyone who's joined the webinar. And we're really going to talk about how managers can really look at increasing their engagement, and whether it's online engagement, whether it's physical engagement, whether it's engagement across all your digital touch points. Because the interesting thing is that, 20 odd years ago when we started ProFuncom, it was literally email fact sheets. And then you went to portal, website, social, you've got all these digital touch points. And every time you add a digital touch point, you increase your inefficiency by 15 to 20%. So by the time you've got 5 digital channels, email, website, social, investor portal, video, if you're not managing that process, your marketing becomes completely inefficient, and it's almost worth not doing it anymore. So really, there is that. It's what I'm going to hopefully cover in this webinar, is how with multiple channels you can still find a way to increase your engagement, increase visibility, feed your funnel, and hopefully at the end of that have some positive outcomes, which is AUM coming into the business, potential upsells to existing investors, or with your IR team preventing money walking out the door. So a bit about ProFuncom. Like I said, we've been going 20 years, and we really just focus around fund managers and helping them use marketing automation to raise money. That's my background. That's where we built the product. And the interesting thing as well is, we try and stay at the forefront of not really selling our product, because the product will sell itself. We are very much around, how can we educate fund managers, people working in hedge funds, marketing teams, around the nuances of demonstrating the impact marketing has on raising AUM. So we run quarterly reports, monthly webinars, user groups throughout the world. So yes, we are a tech company. We're not a consulting house. We balance our consulting by giving away free knowledge around what we're learning from our 400 odd users. So really, what underpins everything that hopefully everybody on this call thinks about is a go-to-market strategy for their fund. And essentially, some managers instinctively know about GTM, go-to-market, and some have no idea. People just go, my performance is everything. And, maybe 20, 30 years ago, it's fine. And you can still see, the background radiation of that in existing old school managers, naming no names. But if you kind of look at the marketing playbook, marketing is really split around building out your fund narrative, creating brand awareness, doing your demand generation, getting engagement. And that's what this webinar is all about, getting that engagement, and then feeding the analytics. Because why the analytics and engagement are so important is that essentially is what your marketing team will be doing on a regular basis. They create content, get engagement, analyze it. And that is the virtuous circle, the echo chamber, whatever you want to call, that amplifies a small marketing team with a small budget and amplifying that out. So you're creating brand awareness. And brand awareness brings its own demand generation, which are very, very different. So the analytics and the engagement essentially feed the funnel. And really, what marketing is doing is it's trying to find a way how your engagements, how your website traffic, how your email content, how your investor portal, how is that ultimately leading to investment? Because ultimately, as a manager, you don't really care about your clicks. You don't really care about your SEO or now AIEO, any of that stuff. You just care, how am I getting money through the door? And the interesting thing about any funnel, it's not what you do at the top of the funnel, and it's definitely not what you do at the end of the funnel. Because at the end of the funnel, it's one-to-one engagement over Outlook and stuff like that. It's all about the mid-funnel journey. And what you want to be doing is what the funnel needs to be doing it needs to be feeding some form of reporting, some form of analytics, where you've got the ability to go into a contact and see. So if I kind of go in here and I kind of go see, well, what has this person been doing? And I can actually see, you can actually see an individual's contact and their engagement over time. And that's where the journey gets fragmented with the funnel, is you're getting lots of leads through, events you're going to, webinars you're running, downloads of content from your website, but somehow that journey just gets lost. And so you can't essentially drill down and do real marketing attribution, which is really the end point of the funnel. And today is really about how do you connect those two together. And also it's the ability to have a reporting suite that allows you to actually see geographically who's engaging with you, which funds are getting more engagement or less engagement, which campaigns are doing better than others from a geography perspective as well. And also being able to look at how your marketing is performing and how that feeds your inflows. So this really is how you take engaged content and convert and actually see which ones can you target, because that's really what we're trying to get to here. And this is really the change in mindset. And I really have, this is what we're going to cover today, but I really want us to really think about on this webinar is not about what I'm going to talk about, which is around automations and all that kind of stuff, is how can you just think differently in your organization? And once you're thinking different, how can you never stop exploring different avenues, different possibilities, colors, fonts, themes, all that kind of stuff? Because a lot of creating more engagement is, well, I've got this idea, but you've got to think differently and you've got to test it. Does it work? Does it not work? And that kind of builds a body of evidence for you to say what works and what doesn't work. And that becomes your secret sauce for maybe that quarter. But then as the microeconomic climate changes, your investor profile changes a bit, you've got to kind of reassess. So you've always got to be thinking different and you've never got to stop exploring. So essentially, the two brands that I'm an absolute sucker for, I've managed to pitch them and I made no money out of that. So there you go. So just going back, what I'm going to talk about is nurturing sequences, behavioral signals, good follow-up, automated reporting, and how do you re-engage inactive contacts. And I'm going to do that in a nice structured way. This is actually available on our website. We are putting a report together about this, or you can download the webinar. But I really think this is one of the most crucial things to talk about going into the new year. So the simplest of automations, trigger workflow, why it's important. Essentially, if a lead is created in your CRM, and this is not a ProFuncom specific product spiel, you could have any CRM, you could have any marketing automation, here are the CRMs we integrate with, other CRMs are available. There are plenty of marketing automation tools available. I'm not, locking you into using ProFuncom. I just want people to think differently. And really it's trigger workflow, why it works. So triggers, a lead created in your CRM, the simplest thing in the world. If a lead is created or a new contact's created, depending on your model, for goodness sake, just send a drip campaign of some content. And of course, I have heard it. Oh, we don't want to send people. We don't want them to think we're bombarding them. The interesting thing is, of all the emails you send out, probably at this level, we have the data, 1 in 5, 1 in 7 get read. So essentially, people will get sick of you after 5 emails, obviously, spaced out correctly. But it really is about how, and this is where brand awareness and demand generation is really important. This is about brand awareness. It's making sure that your brand is front of mind. This is not demand generation where they reply back and say, I'd love to have a meeting with the PM or the manager. No, this is not about this. This is about demand generation. And it builds credibility. And it almost shows an element of discipline. That those kind of signals that those micro signals that you get from a brand when they do, after a webinar, send you an email to say thank you for attending the webinar. Dakota, one of our partners, are fantastic at doing that. And it's like, oh, okay, we know it, and you know it's automated, but it's like, oh, there's some discipline that went into that. Oh, I like that. And we know that ourselves, because when we put out our own content, sometimes people say to us, well, I don't read your content, Paul, but the fact that you send it out makes me feel good about you, that I can trust you. I said, oh, nice to know. So if you don't do anything, just a lead comes in, send them a sequence of emails. And if you've got a good enough product, you'll be able to see at what point do they actually fall out and unsubscribe, or do they actually continue that journey? And one thing about thinking different, if people unsubscribe from you, they ain't into you in the first place anyway. And you think about the things that you subscribe to and you unsubscribe from. It's a really interesting thing. This fear of being unsubscribed is absolutely fine. Trouble with marketers, they just like to live behind a big list. So that's the first thing to talk about. The next thing is if somebody actually engages with you. So let's talk about what engagement is. So engagements could be somebody clicks on a link on an email, so there's a definitive action. They download a deck from the investor portal. They give you a card from an event and become a lead, but a qualified lead within your CRM. And I'm assuming you've got different layers of leads that feed different automations. And so what this allows you to do outside a nurturing campaign, this is an advanced nurturing campaign where you can send it within regulatory frameworks, case studies, investor webinar invitations. You can send them thought leadership pieces or anything like that. And then what you can then do is you can even go down the route of an invitation to meet, or asking that cheeky question, what's holding you back? Because when you've got that second tier of engagement, it's really important to identify is that this is a deeper interest than somebody who's just a lead. And again, that's where the qualified lead comes in. Now, whenever I've kind of said to people, oh, no, we don't want to do the invitation to meet, or we don't want to do what's holding you back. And the reason is because it is quite rude. We feel it's quite rude. But then it's all around how the question's being asked. And we've run this experiment with clients. And those that have kind of agreed with us to say, look, Paul, we'll try your idea. Well, it's not my idea. It's an idea that belongs to Chris Voss. And if you don't know who Chris Voss is, look him up on YouTube. He's part of the Black Swan Group. He's an FBI negotiator, does sales training now. Most of his stuff's available online for free. You can join his group. He's running a webinar, a seminar, I think next year in London and in the US. He has just got one thing, and he just says, I'm just summarizing, TLDR. He basically says, go for the no. So instead of saying an invitation to me, just say, would you be against meeting up when I'm in town? Or would you be against telling me what made you interested in our fund? Very different from, I want to meet you, or tell me why, why are you, why have you downloaded our stuff? Very, very different. And clients that tried this have come back to me every time. And we're not a consultancy house, right? I just give this education free. They're like, wow, Paul, we're getting meetings on the back of that like no tomorrow. And try it. If somebody said to you, would you be against doing something? It's like, no, of course not. So go for the no. And that's, again, a very, very different way of thinking. Think different. Because the thing is, if you think, and I'm sure, we all cherish how we think, we could be wrong in how we think. So just do something different. And what's really interesting is that why it works is because they're a deeper engaged contact, and you're asking them to do something for you. And when you make somebody do something for you, they're actually will have more engagement with you. So if you ask people for help, if you ask people even how to do something, like how do I do this? Very powerful in kind of drawing people in and increasing engagement. And this is not just email engagement. This is just engagement at a party, or engagement at an industry event. It's really about how do you bring people in, and you bring people in by giving them the illusion that they're in control. but you actually are in control all the time because you're asking them questions and going for the no. So there we go. So that's kind of the second type of automation to think about. Then there's the third level of engagement. So you've got the first level who are kind of moderately engaged and you're finding ways to engage them more. You've got the second tier of engagement, but then you've got people like all the, let's have a look, 78 people on this webinar who are essentially, they're the captive audience now. So this is really where you've gone from brand awareness to demand generation. So now we are holding the best part of 208 people who registered for this webinar. Now we are in the world of demand generation. So we are creating the demand. So now when everybody who's attended this webinar, it's like, what workflow can we build out to bring people even closer to us? And essentially, you know, everybody on this webinar has given me their most precious commodity, which is time. So that if that's not a signal for some intent, then more fool me. So essentially now what we've got to do is ask even deeper probing questions, because what that does, it absolutely capitalizes on momentum. And on the back of this, you know, there will be follow-ups, there will be, you know, physical follow-ups, there'll be more invitations. And guess what? You can unsubscribe. But the analysis we've done, only 7% of people who get to this stage unsubscribe from what we're doing. Some of it is FOMO, because people are afraid that I may run a webinar one day that they're really, really interested in. And some is the case where, well, it doesn't really fit. It's very, very rare that what we call an ICP, an ideal customer profile, like an ideal client, would actually come off this. And if people come off this, that's really important, because it's the analysis, think different, of people who aren't attending that should be attending. And that is the absolute way. You've just got to keep exploring on that. It's like, these 30 people should absolutely be on this webinar based on what we know of them. What's the reason they're not? Have they unsubscribed? No. Do we need to build a micro campaign for them? And again, it's not about the product. It's not about anything else. It's about the thought experiments that kind of go into building out great processes and, you know, great automations. So follow-up automations, incredibly important. And investor onboarding, something that is quite not looked at, but essentially it's the IR function, and making sure that the IR team are always finding ways to engage with existing investors. Because the reason for this is apparent in the next automation. Upsell. Upsell, upsell, upsell. If there's anything that 25 years later, almost 1,000 users experience I've got, is the one thing fund managers are absolutely CR4P at, is this. And I have to say, once what managers can, if you've got multiple funds, that is you being able to find a way of automating the process, like how can you go after clients or investors who are in fund A, after you've building automations that offer a different fund or a different share class, if it's educational, personalized email from, you know, the PM or the, you know, investment committee or something like that. And then the key bit is segmenting it by the size of their investment. Doing that has, in the very few customers of ours who've actually had the foresight and discipline, and this is a discipline issue, and thirdly, the time to do this, has completely turned around the value of that marketing team within the organization. And there are two things at play here. One is marketeers have to be software engineers or think like engineers, if then else branching. And the other thing about marketing is marketing was really, really, and you know, I started out as a marketer, you just looked down on. And the reason is because, you don't have a maths degree, you're not studied quant, you don't know actuarial science, you don't know the Black-Scholes model, you don't know how to price an option, all of these things, right? We're klutzes. But there is a world in which if we're feeding the funnel on a regular basis, if the mid-funnel automations are pulling out investments, we become part of the core function in a fund. And ultimately, once you can do that as a marketing team, guess what? Pay rises, more budget becomes a dream. So I have to say, underpinning all of this is how can you make marketing more valuable within your fund? So, and I always say this, do or don't, there's no try. I'd rather you'd look at this and say, not for me. And I'd rather you say, yes, I'll do it. But I'd hate anybody to say, oh, I'll try and do it, because you just can't try. You can't try and build the bridge. You build it or you don't. That's an engineer. Right. So probably coming towards the end of the webinar now, and I can see a few questions have come up, so I will try and answer them. Re-engagement. Now, as I said, marketers hate unsubscribes and they love a big mailing list. The trouble with that is if you've got a mailing list and 20% of people change jobs every 3 years, within a very short time, half your list is out of date. That's the first part. Second part is that if you're sending emails to non-existent mailboxes, your spam rating just goes through the roof. So that's not a good thing. What's really, really useful to do is every period of time is to do two things. The first thing is to email with something completely different, your dormant leads. So leads that have not engaged with you at all. But also having another automation that emails people that have not engaged with you for the past, say, 90 days, but have suddenly started engaging with you, and then building automations out of that. Because obviously something has changed in these people's world. So by shaking the aquarium and just causing all the dust to flow when you're emailing dormant leads, that's great. But once you re-engage them, it's like, okay, what do we do now with these people? Because again, they're not new leads. Something has changed in their world that they're going to re-engage with you. So again, it's kind of thinking, how can you take the investment? Because obviously every contact in your database, there's a cost to them. You got them in through an event, you got them in through sending them some information. God forbid you bought a list. But all the same is, how do you monetize these people who are not engaging with you? So any engagement you get is in some way or form an ROI. And if you think about the funnel, they're starting that journey all over again with you. And I know this is, I think quite debatable around automated distribution. I've put it on here because lots of people try and automate it. Yes, it's fine to send out quarterly, monthlies, absolutely fine, to your prospect list and the like. They will get lost. They will get lost. It is really about creating within these monthly and quarterly reports, one for existing investors and one for prospects. And in the prospects one is really talking about the managers, strategies, and it's it's meant to be very different. The ones to existing investors can be as boring as you like. However, the ones that, because they're well past demand generation, they're clients. But it's the ones for prospects is making sure there's brand awareness going in there. Now, it could be that people say, I only want your fact sheets. That's great. So you don't have to send them any of the automations I sent earlier, but make sure if they're not prospects, they don't get the fact sheet email that's sent to existing investors. They get something very branded because they're still in that demand generation brand awareness phase. Okay, the other thing I want to talk about on automations is you should not and must not automate the content and the numbers in your email templates. I've recently written an article about that. It's because the SEC requirements is that you've got to be able to backtrack where that data came from, and it was eyeballed by a human. So if you want to go down that road, don't, because you'll be in trouble. Okay, we're kind of getting to half of the hour. There was this conversation where, when you've got lots of investors, how do you manage them, and how do you give them the white glove IR team feel? The Apple insane support feeling. What you must not do is use an AI chatbot. Do not. They do not work. They are infuriating. They will kill your brand. All you have to do is use a simple automated system. There's Zendesk, there's Freshdesk, or any other product like that. Just keeps the investors informed how their ticket is progressing, from being received to being assigned to being answered to being escalated. And I know this sounds like quite a techie thing to do, but people are so used to it. If an issue occurs, then build an automation to deal with that, and you can do that in most tools. I was debating about this, but then I thought, think different. Now, the other thing as well is building automations around regulatory KYC as well. That again should feed into your KYC system. Automated reminders, updated doc schedules, new regulation, all that stuff coming out from your fund or from the administrators or from the regulators, just sending them as knowledge pieces to investors, again, gives them that kind of white glove feeling. And hopefully they will look past performance and look towards that complete brand security. Now, I just thought, as a summary, almost on the half hour, segment, if there's anything to do, what are the tips? Segment your audiences so you know who you're targeting. Use behavioral triggers, not just after 7 days, 8 days, 10 days. Build some behaviors in there. Integrate with your CRM. Everything has to have a compliance and audit trail. So whatever you're doing, make sure that it's fed back into the CRM. Measure and optimize. We spoke about that. Stay on brand. Don't use ChatGPT. Avoid spraying and praying, right? Don't just chuck stuff out there, see what sticks. Think about it as well. And use multiple channels. And the reason I spoke about multiple channels, it kind of feeds all the way back to now it's email, social, portal, all these touch points, all these engagement points are feeding into the investor experience. And how you engage with that is actually quite interesting, is that what I've spoken about doesn't cover a particular dimension of email, social, portal, website, or webinars. It covers it all. And all those digital touch points coming in to a central point. And again, what that does, it allows you to give these insights to the sales team in their CRM, whichever CRM they're using. There's Satuate, there's Dynamo, there's Salesforce, and the others. So this is the environment they're in. So they don't have to go looking into Excel spreadsheets. They don't have to go into another system. Getting all this data to them, again, is really the end game. And going back to what I showed you earlier on, where you can drill down into an individual and see what they've been doing. So thank you all for this webinar, joining this webinar. I hope you found how automations can really help overcome people having low engagements and people not engaging with their content, whichever challenge it's on, and how it brings that whole investor journey together from end of funnel from the beginning of the funnel rather to the end of the funnel, especially when, as a fund marketer, we're dealing in long sales cycles. Okay, right. Well, thank you all very much. There's a couple of questions have come in. Why numbers in email should not be well, the reason they shouldn't be automated is, and again, there's a piece on our website talking about this. There's lots of reasons. One, you'll never know its accuracy. Two, it needs, from a compliance perspective, it needs to be eyeballed. Again, it is very dangerous to do that because you become liable for sending wrong numbers. and making sure you've got that, it's again a process thing. So I mean, what I can do, if you send me your email address, I can actually send you the article, but you can find it on ProFundCom Knowledge. It's the third article there. Okay, so I've got another question come in. Is there a risk of oversaturation of sending emails? I think, yes, there is. And the sweet spot is 6 to 8 weeks. That's what I found with clients, what I found ourselves, and seems to be the cycle of marketers. The worst time to send is end of quarter. There's reasons. So that's something to think about. I think with oversaturation, the two fears are we going to be marked as spam, and are we going to get unsubscribed? So I spoke about the unsubscribe. The spam thing is kind of ties in with list hygiene, because the way Microsoft and Google, especially Microsoft, the firewalls are working, is they actually track whether emails sent by a company or a domain or an individual are being opened and read. And if they are for a period of time, they go from the focused folder to the other folders they have, and then they'll just end up going into spam or just get quarantined. So there is a balance, and it is a question of, it's also on deliverability. So if you're sending 5,000 emails a second to one institution, you're going to get blocked. So you've got to build in rules to say, right, we're going to take this set of emails and we're going to filter it, send them out over time. The trouble is that unless you're using most mailing tools don't have this feature. Ours does, but I'm not trying to push what we do, but just be aware of how many emails you're sending over time. So it's not a question of oversaturation, it's also delivery as well, even if it's a small set. So in answer to your question, yeah, there's always a case of oversaturation, but the sweet spot is probably six to 8 for regular comms. And like I said, if someone has had an immediate action, no, we're not saying pick the phone up to them and dial them, saying, oh, we saw you accessing our content, but more, that their engagements with you, and your role as a marketer is how you build on that engagement as opposed to repel. But don't be afraid of unsubscribes. Okay, got another question come in. Look. Okay. I'm being limited by my Outlook for sending emails. So are you being limited by the number of emails you're sending out, or are you using BCC to send emails out? The challenge with BCCs for deliverability and automations and anything like that is that you can't track them. So you won't know, who's engaging with you. I think also the challenge is, as well as with Outlook currently, you can only send 5,000 emails a day, after which they'll block your whole domain from sending emails. So it's not a question of emails bouncing, they just turn you off. And Google's been doing the same as well, so has Yahoo, because they don't want to be bulk email providers. So what I would say is you're going to have to use a third-party tool, unfortunately, if you want to send bulk emails out. So hopefully that covers that. If there was one automation to do, which one would you do? Ooh. I think I would do 2, if I may. And I spoke to you about them earlier on. One is building an automation for people who have not engaged with you for the past 6 months, but are suddenly engaging with you. And the second one would be investors who are looking at funds and products you have that they're not invested in. Those are probably the 2 automations I would think would bring you the most ROI, because they are people that have been dormant that are suddenly engaging with you. So something has changed in their world that you don't know about. So yeah, right. Let's have a quick time check. Just should have gone 35 minutes exactly. Just see if there's any more questions. Let's have a look. Right. Well, if there aren't any more questions, has anyone got anything to say? No? Okay. Well, all I can say is thank you all very much. Have a wonderful Friday and a fantastic weekend. Bye-bye for now.